Just thought I'd do a short video showing the progress I've made on these little single motor robots. This one is has my Pickaxe IR board in it and a LiPo battery. I think it's like 200 milliamps. Has a little IR sensor in here. I've added all these aesthetic features. I made a dome. I vacuum formed a little dome over a mold. For people who don't want to do vacuum forming, when I release the files, I'm going to include this little setup. It's just a little adapter, but a 50 millimeter globe that you can buy on eBay, or I think you can probably even buy them at hobby store, at craft stores. Makes an easy dome for it. I've also built a wired controller that has this is what's inside of it. 2 switches that'll control forward and reverse. I'll release that for anyone who needs something like that. There's 4 AA batteries in here, but it's a little bit larger, so it could accommodate one of the 18650 LiPo cells. It's long enough, and internal structure will allow for that. So that would be like 4 volts instead of 6. This one has a 160 RPM motor in it. For wired version, it's running off 6 volts. The motor is rated 160 RPM at 6 volts. This one, it has a 200 RPM motor, 6 volt 200 RPM motor. If you run this motor with this box, it walks too fast, really. The arms are posable, hands move. I've had to do a lot of modifications. This is a temporary thing now. I'm going to redo this board that the battery sits on so it'll accept the switch. I still have a little more work to do on the CAD on it. I'm pleased with the way it's turning out. This was my first attempt at vacuum forming. It's just a homemade setup. I'll show it here in a minute. Didn't do too good of a job. The buck is made from plaster of Paris. This is my second attempt. It's much better, but still not perfect. But it's good enough for what it is. It's 30 thousandths of plastic. I think it's K&S sheet, clear sheet plastic. I've had it for years and finally used it. So there's my 2 side by side. This was a different mold I was using that I had trouble getting the buck out of. That's why all these lines are in here. I had to actually saw it out. This one I made a two-part mold. I'll show that in a minute. In the final version, like this one, this is a final version of that part. This is keyed in, so it locks in. You would probably just glue this to this and glue the globe to it. You don't need to. The body comes off straight up, so this will stay in place. It's hooked to the frame and not the body. It's all keyed in. I've also done some improvements in the ratchet mechanisms to make it a little more easy to assemble, though it's still not an easy thing to do. I'm operating it with just a universal remote, sending out Sony 12-bit codes. Walks pretty good. Walks about the right speed. I'm pleased with the way it's turning out. I'll be finishing it soon, and when I do, I'll release all the files and do a build video showing how to put it together. This is an older version. This one's a dome here of a brain box, or whatever you want to call it, is mounted, screwed to the body. I redid it so that wasn't the case. This one, it would have been much harder to assemble. This is the setup I used for making vacuum forming the dome. The buck is made from plaster of Paris. It's still not completely dry. It's probably not the best material to use for this. This cracking happened when I added some heat to it to get the vacuum forming to work a little better. Made this one with it. The buck was made in this two-part mold. Also has a cap on it for this is all very messy, this stuff, for putting a dowel rod in it. The purpose of a dowel rod is so you can chuck it up in a drill and sand it down when you're done. It's cracking even worse as it dries more. If I were going to do this again, I would probably, there's a material called Perfect Cast, I believe, that I would probably use. It's a plaster of Paris like material. It's supposed to work. I need to buy some and try it. This fits in here like this. I just heated the plastic was clamped in this frame with screws. I just heated it up with a heat gun until it started sagging pretty good. It's hard to get it even. It's not the best way of doing it, but it's the stuff I had, so that's what I used. Heated up with a heat gun. A shop vac is hooked up to this piece of pipe. Heated it up with a heat gun. It would vacuum on very quickly. Stuck it down like that. It worked pretty well. I had to come in with the heat gun around the edges to get this last part to lay down. I think that's when the buck cracked. That crack came from it. Wasn't there a few hours ago. But it worked pretty well for not knowing what I'm doing and doing it the first time. When I release the files, I'll do this in case anybody wants to go through the trouble of doing that. I think this is probably a much better option. I do like the way this looks, though. It's much more what I was going for when I started out. Well, thanks for watching.